Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Brenner. Today is December 15, 2016. This is a report on fake news. No, this report is not fake news, but it's on the ongoing discussion about the left's war on fake news. I thought we'd start off with the purple goddess, or demon if you like, with her war. That is Hillary Clinton's war on fake news. Ever since Trump won, the liberal media has declared war on the so-called alt-right. Let's hear what she has to say.
The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year, it's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk. Lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their days, to do their jobs, contribute to their communities. It's a danger that must be addressed, and addressed quickly. Bipartisan legislation is making its way through Congress to boost the government's response to foreign propaganda, and Silicon Valley is starting to grapple with the challenge and threat of fake news. It's imperative that leaders in both the private sector and the public sector step up to protect our democracy and innocent lives.
Okay, call me a cynic, but really, this is butthurt over losing the election to Trump. And yes, alternative media played a big role. And she got burnt by WikiLeaks. Let's hear what Alex Jones has to say on the subject.
Waging war on corruption, crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Monday, the 12th day of December, 2016, and I'm your host, Alex Jones. About 30 seconds before I went on air, we have different monitors on with Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, C-SPAN. We have TVs in the hallways, TVs in the break room, TVs in the control room. We're just monitoring things. Plus screens up everywhere, tracking the latest news developments, going through your news tips. And I was sitting there looking at CNN on the screen, and it said, Trump battles CIA. And then it cut to, Trump is with Putin. And I'm just reading the big text, the white text on a red background at the bottom of the screen. And it's so surreal that you have a president that's just trying to restore our republic, get fair trade deals, defend the Second Amendment, appoint Americana judges to the Supreme Court, and you've got Hollywood and mainstream media only getting more shrill, more hysterical, more wild-eyed, more crazy. Now, it's coming out very, very quickly that the entire election was manipulated by the Russians. Narrative is a huge, gargantuan, colossal hoax. We have the evidence of that today we're going to be going over. But we've already been hearing this for over a year, that Russia's manipulating our election, despite the fact that even Mika Brzezinski has come out and said that if they mildly criticized Hillary, they would get threatened with their jobs by the Clinton campaign through their bosses at NBC. But we already know that from the WikiLeaks. Glenn Greenwald had an article out yesterday where minions of Hillary were just producing completely fake news, giving it to MSNBC, and they were running with it when they knew it was a lie. DrudgeReport.com has a story up. The latest reporter that just got hired at a senior position at the New York Times has come out and it is now being hired there. And it turns out in the WikiLeaks, this is a person that got directives from the Hillary campaign. So even after they're caught, they're doing this. But when I say it's fake to claim there's this Russian connection, we have all the multinationals and the globalists and the big foundations and the CIA involved in our elections, all of it's supposed to be illegal. We now have former UK ambassador saying, quote, I met with the DNC leaker and he isn't Russian, saying the CIA information is, quote, total BS. That's in the London Guardian today. It's up on Infowars.com. We have former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, coming out and saying that he believes it's a Obama false flag and that if there is any intel, it was planted by them recently during the campaign. Yeah, that makes absolute perfect sense, doesn't it? All this and a lot more, but here's the bottom line. They're trying to overthrow the election of the 45th president of the United States. They now admit they're doing it.
Now, are you ready for this? This is simply unbelievable. This is what Pope Francis has to say about fake news. And I fact-checked this. This is absolutely true.
No, this is not a headline from The Onion. This is real life, and I personally could not believe my eyes when I read this article today when it came across the newswire. Absolutely sick. The Pope now likens exposing politicians, smearing politicians, and fake news. He likens it to a feces fetish, but it actually gets worse. This story from Philip Pelula from Reuters News Service. This is actually a Reuters News Service. They write here, he says, media that focus on scandals and spread fake news to smear politicians risk becoming like people who have a morbid fascination with excrement. Those are the words of Pope Francis, who said this in an interview that was published on Wednesday. Francis told the Belgian Catholic Weekly that spreading disinformation was probably the greatest damage that the media can do, and using communications for this rather than to educate the public amounted to a sin. Now, this is what they said. Using precise psychological terms, he said that scandal-mongering media risked, this is what he said, risked falling prey to coprophilia, or arousal from excrement. Now, why the Pope would have any idea what that is anyone's guess. And then he said that the consumers, the consumers of this type of media risk coprophagia, or those that would eat the excrement itself. Yes, the Pope joining in on the fake news assault, as well as slamming media that would hold politicians accountable. Slamming media that would, in his words, smear politicians. So I guess what we're not supposed to hold politicians accountable. We're not supposed to shine a light on them so that the people can see the crimes that they are perpetrating against the people of the world. No. In the Pope's eyes, that's the same as eating feces and arousing yourself with feces. I looked up the term, and my goodness, I did a Google image search, and I warn you, do not do a Google image search on these terms, coprophilia or coprophagia, because the visuals that will be returned to you will never leave your mind. So for the fact that the Pope is using these terms is just, I don't know, maybe he's into that stuff. I don't know. This is just crazy, okay? Okay, maybe I crossed the line there, but they write here, to get his point across while answering the question about the use of media, quote, I think the media have to be very clear, very transparent, and not fall into, and he says, no offense intended, the sickness of coprophilia, that is always wanting to cover scandals, covering nasty things, even if they are true. So he's basically saying, even if the politicians have absolutely 100% truthful scandals, that the media should just ignore them. So now you have the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, telling the media to ignore the crimes of politicians and the scandals of politicians in favor of letting them continue their corrupt practices. And if you do cover it, you're the one who's sinning. They continue with the quote here, and since people have a tendency towards the sickness of coprophagia, a lot of damage can be done. Okay, so how does it, he says people have a tendency towards the sickness of coprophagia? People, that's a pretty broad statement that a pope would make. people have he said, a tendency. Now, personally, I don't know anybody who has a tendency towards eating feces. I just don't. I hope to never meet somebody who has that type of a fetish. That would just be... this is news. This is coming across the news wire today. They write that section, Reuters continues, that section of the interview, all of which was distributed to reporters in an Italian translation of the interview in the Pope's native Spanish, contains some of the most blunt language the pontiff has ever used about the media. Now, if you don't believe me, the link to the Reuters story is in the description below. Right there. You can go and see it for yourself with your own eyes. His words on the official newswire. They write, Reuters says, he also spoke of the danger of using the media to slander political rivals. Quote, the means of communication have their own temptations. They can be tempted by slander and therefore used to slander people, to smear them. This above all in the world of politics. They can be used as a means of defamation. He says, no one has a right to do this. It is a sin and it is hurtful. Then he continued, Reuters says that he described disinformation as the greatest harm the media can do because it directs opinion in only one direction and omits other parts of the truth. Well, I hate to break it to you, Pope Francis, but people are going to have opinions, and like myself. And people are going to provide commentaries and perspectives on what they see happening in the world. And that's what I do on a daily basis. And I have a bias. My bias is towards truth. My bias is towards freedom. My bias is towards limited government. So that's where my perspective is going to be driven from. So, yes, I'm going to present the news from that perspective. And a lot of times that includes slandering politicians, exposing them for their scandals, and reporting the truth. But according to you, even if that is done, that is akin to basically being a fecal philiac. Oh man. That's what the Catholic Church is saying, my friends. So the Catholic Church is getting in on the game, attacking the fake news narrative, jumping on that bandwagon. But that's, par for the course at this point, because this is the elite establishment. He's a member of the establishment. I don't care what view. Come on, let's be honest here. You know this. This is the establishment's method to try to hold on to one last strand of the narrative. Now they're calling in the religious, leaders of the world to basically call us all coprophiliacs. Yeah, I guess that's what I am now. I was once a Russian propagandist, but now I'm a coprophiliac. And you are a coprophagiac. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is just both appalling and disgusting. I just cannot imagine a religious figure like that saying such a thing. But now it gets worse. There is legislation that is basically designed to shut down the alternative media under the guise that it's propaganda and just downright fake. Listen to this.
Hey guys, Dabu7. Here within the past couple weeks, I talked about how the House was pushing this bill in regards to the whole meme with fake news. Well, it looks now like the Senate has made the same move, quietly pushing this through. And how they did it was tucking this whole thing in to the NDAA 2017. Now, this is written as the Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act. And the only way it went through, like I said, is it was ticker taped into the NDAA, and most people out there have not a clue what just happened. Like most of the things they do when nothing's mentioned on your evening news whatsoever. So at first, they wanted to sit there and say Russia this, Russia that. Then they start turning their guns toward anything out there attached to alt-right, anything they can dub conspiracy, and they want to label it all as fake news. And there's been an overuse, big time, of it that's gotten out of control, and it shows they're in damage control. But at this point, with this bill being pushed, they're basically, while no one's paying attention, they're attacking your freedom of speech. And that's what's happening. So it's moves like this being made on the daily that just because it's not being blasted across your evening news, it's people just they either don't care or they're not getting the information. There is a massive level of censorship going on out here on the daily as well. But this is very vital information. Taking away the real news out here. And they've been censoring. They're going to continue to do it. And in different forms and fashions. So I'll leave a link here with more information pertaining to this. But it's critical that people see what's happening. Like I said, first it was the House, then the Senate quietly passing this and tucking it away in the NDAA. And for those that don't know what that is, you need to look into that and do some research on that with everything that they've done there. With Obama, just with him being in power, putting it in a writing that with, one stroke of the pen, he can seize control of all the resources, all the commerce, all the food, all the water, all the everything.
The last time I checked, the Bill of Rights gave us the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of the press. But hey, let's blame it on Russian propaganda, right? CNN, Cartoon News Network. Here's some crap we made up. I must not question corporate rule. I like that little graphic there. The mainstream media just gets nauseating after a while. I just get sick of it. Anybody that, questions America, questions what we do, it's considered un-American. If you question the narrative for anything, I remember it started with demonizing so-called 9/11 truthers. 2 planes hit, 3 buildings fall. Gee, there's something wrong with the math there. But how dare we? How dare we ask questions? Because after all, 9/11 was co-opted into a war with Iraq, who supposedly had weapons of mass destruction. And gee, who gave us the fake news about the weapons of mass destruction? I don't know. Was it NBC, CNN, Fox News, all the different newspapers? And I largely blame this on the media consolidation made possible by the Federal Communications Act of 1996. And guess who was in power back then? The Clintons. So they facilitated this move. And, besides Hillary Clinton spending over $1 billion and having the mainstream media in her back pocket to try to win this election, and I'm still convinced there was a picture going around with Bill Clinton playing golf with Donald Trump back in 2015. He probably encouraged him to run, thinking that he would knock out all the other guys like Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Ben Carson, Rand Paul, Kasich, whoever else. And then he probably figured, whoever, Podesta, Hillary, Bill, the whole brain trust probably figured they would KO Trump with a 1-2 punch. Well, guess what? He is a slick salesman. He wrote The Art of the Deal. He's obviously a billionaire. He knows what he's doing. And he, became a populist candidate. And, the media covered him just long enough to get his message out there about the wall and, to paint him as an Islamophobe. And I'll admit, I drank the Kool-Aid at first. I'm saying, is all this guy going to talk about, is divisiveness and, Muslims and, keep out the Mexicans? I mean, he's making a fool of himself. But then when he really started talking policy, the media were nowhere to be found. And it's funny because Hillary Clinton herself, she was nowhere to be found. After the fact, she blamed the press for giving Trump so much coverage. But then I thought it was clever when they fired back and said, well, you didn't do any press events for 200 and some odd days. Now, whether that was her being sick with whatever her neurological condition is, it's highly speculated with the symptoms she's exhibited that it's Parkinson's. I don't know, but clearly she's unwell, and she wants to cover that up, just like she wants to cover up 4/5 of the things that are going on with her. My opinion on this whole Pizzagate thing, I share it with Mike Rivero from What Really Happened. It's something that I think it's bait that they dangled out there. Whether or not there's something going on, I don't really know. Those Instagram images from Comet Ping Pong were extremely disturbing, but I almost think it was something they fed to the alternative media for them to pounce on. And then they send this guy in there with the AR-15, who coincidentally, I haven't verified this, but I did hear from another YouTuber that he has an IMDb page. I would like to look into that. If somebody could fact check that, I would appreciate that. See, I don't want to give fake news. When I hear something, I'm going to tell you that it is hearsay, but it wouldn't surprise me. So this way they can say, you see, there's fake news. There's the alt-right perpetrating fake news. And this is what it comes down to. You have people like Mike Rivero, Alex Jones. I mean, even like, Michael Savage. You have all these guys out there that basically are pretty good people. They care about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And even someone like Alex Jones acknowledges there are well-meaning liberals, and I tend to believe the same thing. But I also believe there are well-meaning conservatives, too, that want to preserve the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I think a lot of this divisiveness is manufactured by the mainstream media. I mean, myself personally, I have no problem with African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, nonviolent Muslims. I have no problems with the LGBT. I feel like they almost like under Obama, things got worse. Look at how MSNBC edited the recording with George Zimmerman calling about Trayvon Martin. They dropped out the portion where the operator said, "What is the race of the man?" And he said, I think he's black. And they spliced it together, so they made it sound like he was calling about the guy that was up to no good because he was black. Let's face it. The media has routinely engaged in wholesale deception, whether it's for ratings, whether it's because they're afraid of getting fired by their superiors. I mean, the days of the Pentagon Papers and Watergate are long gone. I mean, the only really unbiased publisher, whether it's against the left, the right, the center, whomever, is WikiLeaks. And now there's this big debate raging whether Julian Assange is okay, whether he's alive, whether he's being held captive someplace. I don't know. I wish Julian the best. I mean, I think he is a true social justice warrior. A lot of people want to see him get a pardon. I hope to see that. I can understand the case for somebody like Edward Snowden not getting a pardon because he actually had a security clearance that he clearly violated. Although I admired his spirit, because, you know, we knew all along because of sources like William Binney that we were being spied on, you know, thanks to things like the Patriot Act. I mean, the government had a bunch of things on the shelf, and if you saw how quickly after 9/11 they implemented that, there's no way they could have pieced together that much legislation and signed it into law just a month later. That's insane. But I digress. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Mike Rivero makes a good point in that the corporate media really can't change its business model. Because if they start telling the truth, they're going to get into a lot of trouble. If they start burning big fish, then, you know, look at what happened when Dan Rather told the truth about George Bush and his, you know, service. He lost his job, you know, and I think that was a warning shot to the media at large. If you mess with us, you know, if you mess with the cabal of elites, you will get fired or something worse. You know, all I'm looking for when I'm looking at news stories is I want integrity. I want to see a journalist that's not afraid to go after somebody, not only somebody of the opposite political bent, but even somebody in his or her own political faction, or if they're nonpartisan, just anybody, somebody that's guilty of corruption, somebody that is not an honest public servant, whatever the case may be, I want to see justice done. And I think, by and large, that's what the American public are looking for. You know, and the term, quote, fake news, end quote, really bothers the hell out of me. And let me tell you why. It's disingenuous. What they really mean to say is news that does not jibe with the mainstream narrative, or news with a conservative overtone. Not necessarily fake news. And what they seem to do when they put out some of these lists is they'll say, these are the sites to look out for. InfoWars, Breitbart, Drudge Report, The Onion, Weekly World News. So they'll put in some legitimate alt-right or conservative or independent media sites, and then they'll throw in some trash, you know, like, look, it's the amazing Frog Boy, or Sasquatch Lives, you know, and they try to basically deceive people that way. I don't really believe that these so-called alt-right sites or independent sites, or even take somebody like H.A. Goodman, who is a professed Bernie Sanders supporter, a professed progressive. And boy, did he tear into Hillary Clinton. He called her basically a dumpster fire of a candidate, and I couldn't have said it better myself. But it's so funny. I knew all these liberals and progressives that absolutely loved WikiLeaks. They thought it was the greatest tool for equalizing and social justice. But then all of a sudden, one of their own got ensnared in the trap. And oh boy, all of a sudden, WikiLeaks is crap. And what did Hillary Clinton say? I'm not exactly sure about this, but I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere, can't we just order a drone strike on him? Yeah, that's all. That's the answer to her problems. Boy, she, you know, if she had her way, I'm sure Assange would have died in either a plane crash or he would have committed suicide by shooting himself in the back of the head. You know, if you want some interesting reading, and I'm not saying that she's responsible or Bill Clinton's responsible for every single one of these, but Google or YouTube the Clinton body count. And I'll tell you, even if they're only behind 20% of those deaths, they have Cosa Nostra beat. But anyway, there again, I digress. This wasn't meant to be a diatribe against the Clintons. But there again, I really think what's been said is this is a desperate attempt for the cabal to hang on to power because they're scared that if they can't somehow tamper with the Electoral College or assassinate Trump before the vote comes in, or maybe, assassinate him after, and then Pence takes over, and he would make the perfect New World Order puppet. They're afraid that a whole lot of them are going to go to jail. I don't know, the likes of the Clintons, definitely Podesta. I mean, if you read those Podesta emails, that guy is no good. I mean, and I just don't buy that the Russians tampered with the email. I mean, Assange said it best himself. WikiLeaks has been going for 10 years. Why would they sully their credibility now? And he confirmed that it was not the Russians, and I'm inclined to believe him, Now, whether WikiLeaks has since been co-opted by Central Intelligence or some other, foreign spy agency, I don't necessarily know. I mean, they put some stuff out there like Yemen files and cables from 1979, and it just seems like some weak sauce if you ask yours truly. But, I don't know, it could just be bait that's out there to make people think WikiLeaks is still operational. But if I were a leaker, I would be extremely careful that somebody doesn't show up at your residence a couple days later and throw a black hood over your head and take you down to Gitmo or something. I mean, there again, it's just a hypothesis. I mean, somebody claiming to be a former staffer from WikiLeaks posted a YouTube video with a synthesized voice, and then people wrote in the comments section that it was a prank, and I don't really know. But then again, that could have been a disinformation campaign put out by the government, because, as you know, the Obama administration and others have taken a very hard line against whistleblowers. So if you think about it, the knife kind of cuts both ways. It's like, if WikiLeaks is compromised, they want to scare the crap out of people for a good reason, because they don't want whistleblowers to get in trouble. But even if it's not, it would be in the government's interest to scare people away from leaking, because after what happened with the Clintons and everybody associated with them, that was quite the snafu. My whole point is, I really think it would be excruciatingly unfair if sites like InfoWars, Breitbart, Drudge Report, and those were to get shut down. And I would even hope that a true progressive and a true liberal were to respect the First Amendment enough to say, fine, I don't necessarily agree with dissenting voices, but I will tolerate them in the spirit of free speech, because that's how America was set up, and that's what our forefathers intended. But some of these people, and notice I don't say all, but some of them, just to be, to use the phrase all the millennials seem to like, the phrase, they just seem to be so butthurt over the election that it's like, that's it, we're just going to shut down anybody that doesn't agree with us, and it's going to be like, state-run media. And they are just so desperate to get the narrative back, they will stop at nothing, if they have to blackmail electors, death threat them to get Hillary in. But let me tell you, if they get her in instead of Trump, she will be a lame duck. They're talking about they're trying to take the mandate away from Trump. I really don't envision much of a presidency for her. Between her failing health, the scandals that will never leave her alone. I mean, her best remedy right now is to fade away into oblivion. I would really think that's the smartest move. But honestly, I think that there needs to be a countervailing force, and that is what the independent media represents. And I don't know if the Pope is losing his marbles with his reference to excrement. I mean, that is just bizarre. That seems like fake news in and of itself. But no, you can check. It was carried by Reuters. I mean, maybe there was something lost in translation, but making analogies to coprophilia? Jeez. But let's see what happens. But and this blaming Putin stuff, I'm telling you, that is dangerous business. Because while Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction, I can tell you, I've been alive long enough to know Russia most definitely has weapons of mass destruction. And if you go through the WikiLeaks, I know that Hillary Clinton knows that Russia has weapons of mass destruction, because for crying out loud, she and John Podesta arranged to sell Russia uranium. Gee, I wonder what, pray tell, they did with said uranium. But we're not supposed to know that because it's all fabrication. And I guess this standard tactic is, Hillary's in bed with the Russians. No, spinning around. Must be Donald Trump. Donald Trump is really a Russian agent. The alt-right, they work for the Russians, and nobody can be trusted. And I'm talking to liberals now. Some in my family, some are my friends, and they're drinking the Kool-Aid. They believe Russia tampered with our elections. While I know they don't like Hillary Clinton, there's plenty of people in this country that don't like her. Honestly, what's to like about her? I get the people that went with her because they can't stand Trump. I get that. But honestly, people, I'm going to wrap it up with this. Use your brain. If you look at it, this whole thing does not pass the stink test. If we let the alternative media die and all that's left is the mainstream media, I don't think we're going to hear much truth at all. And I think you're going to see the death of the First Amendment as we know it. It's really a sad state of affairs. Feel free to comment and to subscribe to my channel. I look forward to releasing more information as it comes forward. Thank you, and have a nice day, everybody. I appreciate you listening and watching. All right, everybody. This is December 16th, and I feel compelled to do an update because after posting this video, I came to find out that Julian Assange did an interview with Sean Hannity. Now, he wasn't actually pictured in this interview. They just showed a picture of him, and it was his voice. Now, do be aware that there is the technology to synthesize somebody's voice. I happen to have studied linguistics. It's an interest of mine. There are 44 distinct phonemes in the English language. If you have enough samples of somebody's speech, there are computer algorithms that actually can synthesize their voice saying just about anything. But I'm actually inclined to believe it is Julian. I'm going to, after what I'm saying right now, I'm going to post at the tail end of this some of that interview with Julian Assange. He totally dispels this idea of Russian propaganda and the idea that, Putin is just poisoning the well and it was him that had everything to do with the WikiLeaks. He confirms, no, that it was a disgruntled member of the DNC, and he kind of suggests that it was maybe somebody that was mad that Bernie Sanders got screwed over. And it's a pretty good interview. And I'm... Okay, this is just my personal opinion. It's not fact. I mean, if I had to fabricate a statistic, I'm 80% confident it is Julian Assange. But I just do want to make it clear that the technology exists, and I'm sure the NSA or the CIA have the technology to fabricate his voice. Now, what he's actually up to, if he's still at the Ecuadorian embassy, I don't know. But I just felt the need to clarify because I went on this whole rant about, Julian could be dead or, in prison somewhere. And, I don't want to spread misinformation because my whole rant is about fake news. And I don't want to be spreading that. So coming up is going to be a segment of the interview between Sean Hannity and Julian Assange, and it's actually a pretty good interview. So I hope that you enjoy it. and listen to what he has to say. It's pretty good information. I think you'll find it informative.
Julian joins us now on our Newsmaker line. Julian, welcome back to the program. Thank you for being with us.
G'day, Sean.
I know you follow the news closely. I know you see the narrative. Now, there is a big brouhaha in the United States. The same media, by the way, that WikiLeaks exposed as colluding with Hillary Clinton's campaign, with near hysteria getting up to the president and John Podesta with Hillary's campaign, claiming over and over and over again that it's clear, the CIA says so, even though there's no new evidence whatsoever that we didn't have prior to the election, and that the FBI contradicts, and James Clapper, the National Director of Intelligence, contradicts, that in fact the Russians tried to influence and the elections and this hacked information came from them, and you're saying that is outright false. That's a falsehood.
Our source is not the Russian government.
So in other words, let me be clear. Russia did not give you the Podesta documents or anything from the DNC.
That's correct.
Can you confirm whether or not you have information involving hacked info from the RNC?
We received about 3 pages of information to do with the RNC and Trump, but it was already public somewhere else.
Okay, so in other words, there was nothing significant. There was nothing comparable to what happened. So what Reince Priebus said on NBC to Chuck Todd this weekend was true, and NBC had it wrong.
Well, as far as we're aware of.
As far as you're aware of.
Yeah.
Now, the CIA supposedly says the Russians definitely tried to influence the U.S. election. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's very interesting. The key quote for us is from James Clapper on the 17th of November. James Clapper is the head of the DNI. He's the Director of National Intelligence, who oversees all 17 U.S. intelligence agencies. And so his statement is, as far as the WikiLeaks connection, this is made to the House Intelligence Committee, as far as the WikiLeaks connection, the evidence is not strong, and we don't have a good insight into the sequencing of the releases or when the data may have been provided. We don't have good insight into that. So
let me, for the sake of our audience, Julian, let me play the exact quote. This is James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, saying exactly what you did, that in fact the Russian government, well, to what he exactly said, that in fact he was very, very clear in saying that WikiLeaks connection with Russian hacking is not strong. Watch.
As far as the WikiLeaks connection, the evidence there is not as strong, and we don't have good insight into the sequencing of the releases or when the data may have been provided. We don't have as good insight into that.
So that confirms exactly what you're saying. Can you answer whether or not there's a report out today, and there was a report out earlier this week, that in fact they can trace back some leaks to the Department of Homeland Security as it relates to the state of Georgia? Do you know anything about those?
I looked when look. Let's pull back a bit. There's a deliberate attempt this week to conflate a whole lot of different issues together. It seems to be as a desire, an extremely dangerous and foolish desire, to flip members of the U.S. Electoral College around into getting up John Kasich or Hillary Clinton on the 19th.
Mm-hmm.
It's foolish because it won't happen. It's dangerous because the argument that it should happen can be used in 4 years' time or 8 years' time for a sitting government that doesn't want to hand over power. And that's a very dangerous thing. There's Clinton-aligned PACs putting out ads with lots of celebrities trying to push these electors to do it. So how are they rhetorically going about it? Well, there's our publications that did make significant influence during the election. Lots and lots of Americans took them up, read them, analyzed them, forwarded them to each other. It was the most discussed topic, according to Facebook, throughout October. Okay, but then we have U.S. intelligence saying they don't know how we got our stuff or when we got it, and us saying we didn't get it. from a state. Then there's hacking of various systems that have occurred. Okay, presumably to get intelligence. The Israelis do it, the Russians do it, the Chinese do it, the French do it every year and every election cycle to understand what policies are. So it's no surprise at all that there's record of Russians or others hacking a lot of these systems. That's
let me put the question.
Intelligence collection.
Let me put this a different way. The state of Georgia in the United States, the Secretary of State there now confirms 10 separate cyber attacks on its network that were all traced back to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security addresses. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know about this specific case, but the state hacking I do know about because I followed it when it first came up in the original FBI report. Look, these are about election voter registration systems, not vote counting systems.
Right.
It seems to be just basic identity theft. If you read what DHS said at the time, it said that it looked like these were going to be sold online in black markets. Is the FSB going to be selling voter registration records online in black markets? No, of course. It's almost overwhelmingly likely that it is just identity theft.
Let me ask you this.
As far as the DHS attacks are concerned, that could be a number of things. It could be the DHS just testing security, and then people using the logs of those tests, or rather misusing them to try and claim that there's been attempted hacks of these systems.
Well, there you have it, straight from Julian Assange. And I think he really explained everything clearly, and I think he has the utmost credibility. I have a lot of respect for Julian, and I really like that interview with Sean Hannity. If you want to hear the complete interview, just search on YouTube for Sean Hannity and Julian Assange, and it'll come right up. You should be able to find it, and you can listen to the entire thing. Well, that's about it, folks. I think I've made a pretty strong case by including everything about how the media colludes with government to spin their narrative. They are out to get the alternative media because the alternative media has the ultimate goal of doing nothing else but telling the truth. And the truth has the very danger of taking down the cabal that has been in power for quite a long time. And these people are scared if Trump and his administration come into power that they are going to prison. And I really don't doubt it because Sessions in the Justice Department, he seems like a no-nonsense kind of guy. So that's my update. I hope that you enjoyed and appreciated this video. And I plan on making some more. So that's about it. But I felt compelled to make this update because I want to make things as accurate as possible. This is Matthew Brenner. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like and share this video. That's it for today.